Hello, everybody. This is Global Warming Skeptic here to just give an example of just the problem with what we're facing, in particular this election cycle, but how things have degraded over time. And for me, who's an idea and policy wonk, it's sad to see things deteriorate to this. Now, this is the Megyn Kelly search results on Twitter here. And it's just, there's people who say, well, let me just say what happened. Basically, Newt Gengrich went on the Kelly file, and then they got into a bitter argument. Megyn Kelly was talking about Trump tapes, the whole Pussygate scandal, and then Newt Gingrich was talking about how Megyn character attacks Trump but does not attack Bill Clinton, and then he makes the remark that Megyn Kelly is obsessed with sex. Now, whether or not you agree with whether Megyn Kelly or Newt Gingrich won that conversation, just let's step back from this election. Just we're having this discussion, and part of it is the whole manifestation of Donald Trump's character, whether or not you agree with the attacks on him or not. The fact is that his candidacy has revealed, basically put a naked problem, and that is that we're not talking about issues. And this is what's really disappointing to me is this election more than ever, but it's especially come up the last few cycles. We're not talking about abortion, we're not talking about tax policy, fiscal policy, businesses, income inequality, the environment, how even climate change. And I'm a skeptic of climate change, but something like that would be worth talking about. You have tons and tons of issues, especially in an election like this, and all the media wants to talk about is what nasty word Trump said, or Bill Clinton's sex scandals, or things like that. Just all these character attacks on people. And yes, character matters, but it matters in a different sort of way. Character matters in the sense of, does this character attack describe how they are going to run the country? And whether or not you agree with Pussygate, Trump describing sexual assault, these women that are coming out, just with any character attack, just ask yourselves, does this affect how this person will operate as president? And even if it does have an impact on you, I'm not going to blame you and say, like if somebody says gross things about women, but here's the problem. We're not talking about issues at all. It's not even that they're not being talked about enough. We have a crisis in Syria right now, millions of refugees. You have Obama threatening Assad. You have Russia guaranteeing the independence of the Assad regime. You have China going in. You have Iran going in. You have all these different rebel groups mixed, Al Nusra. You have ISIS. You got all these interplays, super complex situation in Syria, as the cities are basically apocalypse-like ruins. You have deteriorating foreign policy. You have the UN taking control of ICANN. You have so many different issues, policy issues, both foreign and domestic. We're not talking about that. The media is not talking about that. And this is the problem. And if you got this far into this video, I'm going to declare it is your responsibility. I want you guys listening to look up on YouTube 1960 presidential debate between Kennedy and Nixon. Look up those old debates and listen to what's discussed. And then I want you to look at the debate questions. You don't have to look at the videos, but look at the transcripts of the questions asked of Hillary and Trump during all three of the debates. The first debate was like, you said this about Alicia Machado, you said this on a bus, you said the word pussy, you grab them in the pussy, and, and compare that. I want you to compare that to the 1960 debates. It was all policy back then. There was very few character attacks. And this isn't the first time we've had this problem either. This is a re-emerging problem. Because these were the kinds of attacks that we also had during the late 1800s. The late 1800s was also a time where the presidents were weak and incompetent, and we were extremely vulnerable. We were fortunate that we didn't have any external threats in the late 1800s, because boy, was our country run horribly at that time. Many incompetent presidents that ran on either prior political experience or were Civil War veterans, and that could not translate into policy. But here's the problem, and this is the difference between back then and now, and we better be able to get a hold of this problem, because we may not get an opportunity to correct it and stay in our prominent position today. The problem is we don't have a Cold War today. And I really hate to say that, because the Cold War was a seriously scary event, but with that scary event, we were outside of our comfort zone. There was no place to hide. You had to face that Cold War threat, and that meant that you had better have people in power who are strong leaders and who are competent, can get things done. Today, you don't have that same pressure. You have, instead of wondering who's going to deal with the Soviet Union better, or who is going to prepare our population to compete in the same world that the Soviet Union's in, instead you have social justice warriors crying because of improper pronouns. That's how far down we've gotten. We have no pressure to be competitive. And again, I'm just saying this as a warning. We better start considering meritocracy more and educating ourselves to create that pressure, because you have the Chinese and you have the Indians who are rising powers militarily and economically. And once they pass us, there's not going to be anything where we could jumpstart our economy, jumpstart our meritocracy to where we could keep up with them. They are going to blow past us. Because while the Soviet Union had corruption in their own right, you have China who's embracing more and more free trade, trying to open up slowly their markets to the West. Communism, while it exists, it is dying in China. It's become not communist, but more of a state capitalist system, where it's just most of the entities are run by the state, but they don't run on Marxist principles. They have a class system now. You have an emerging middle class in China. It's not full, even redistribution of wealth with the Chinese anymore. They have their state-run businesses run like actual companies. Their markets run like Western markets. It's not, if you look at their system, it is not very communist anymore. They've moved on, and they are starting to dominate the market, and in fact, their total purchasing power of their populations already exceeded that of the United States. And that's a fact. You could look it up, World Bank, the UN, IMF. All of them say that China has passed us in terms of total purchasing power. In terms of raw productivity and wealth, they haven't passed us yet. But we're running out of time. And in order to reverse this, I don't care who gets elected. I don't care what kind of system you run. But if we don't start voting based on merit, and if we don't get rid of this spoils system, then our prominent place is going to be lost. And we are going to degrade and decline. And if you really want to see a decline, watch what happens when the Chinese take over the world economy. And you know what's going to happen? The US dollar is going to lose its status as the world's reserve currency. And a lot of you listening may not even understand what that is, but let me just tell you. It's basically the conversion between every other currency. Everything has to be able to be traded in US dollars, because that's basically how we've run the economy. The US dollar has circulated throughout the world and been used as a reserve currency to convert to the other individual currencies. Once that ends and they stop trading in US dollars, you're going to see what it's like to have fiscal policy forced upon you. And this is the type of thing I'm talking about with meritocracy, is when you got people who just pretend that we can just let this debt go, that we can build infrastructure, we can pay all this stuff, it's going to come to an end. Anyhow, I think I've ranted enough. Basically, the gist of this whole thing is that the media is poisoning the people. And what's infuriating is it's very hard to get information outside the media. You can find it, but it's usually going to be another government source, which is bureaucratically run, which has its own set of problems. And you have the alt right, which, although it's better than the mainstream media, and they focus on the issues a lot more than the mainstream media, the reality is the alt right also has its own set of problems, particularly with some forms of right wing extremism that does not represent the values of a lot of people. And it's very hard to get information outside of that. At least for normal people, unless you want to stick your nose into Google Scholar, look up peer review, and even then you're not going to get foreign policy current events. And that's a problem we're facing. It's stuff like Fox News. Fox News, CNN, which has become the Fox News of the left, MSNBC, all these entities are poisonous. Full of character attacks, sensationalist stories, and chasing headlines as opposed to reporting. And if we can't win this fight with the media, it's like I said, our prominent position's done. There's no debate about it. It is done. You cannot have a media that is as uninformed, as biased, and as focused on character attacks and headline chasing over the issues as it is, and have a prominent run society. Because it's going to breed nothing but incompetence within our government and within our population. And it's like I don't care if it's by a boycott. I don't care if it's through some sort of protest. But things gotta change with this media. This media it's not going to lead us to a strong country. And in many respects, there's nothing else we have to fall back on. We have to rely on that for some things. And it has got to change, and it's got to come from somebody. And to be honest, where it's going to come from is well outside of my creativity level to even come up with something. But somebody's got to do it, and that's just all I got to say. Thanks for listening, guys. God bless.